Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will now begin session 9-2 of the Korea Global Forum for Peace 2022. We are providing simultaneous interpretation into Korean and English. For Korean, please press 3, and for English, please press 4. If you have any questions during the duration of this session, please make use of the QR code or the link on the bottom of your page for our online participants. This session is titled North Korea's Participation in International Environmental Institution. The moderator of this session is Professor Jang Hee-kyung, who is from the University of Duisburg, Essen of Germany.
Good afternoon, everyone in Korea.
Ms. Professor
Good
Jang.
morning, everyone in Germany. Welcome to this panel on the North Korean participation in International Environment Institution. My name is Hee-kyung Jang, and I'm teaching International Relations and North Korean Politics at the University of Duisburg, Essen in Germany. I'm very happy to be here as a moderator with all the colleagues together, and with these very interesting topics. Most of the topics focusing on the North Korea are mainly focusing on the high politics, like security issues with the nuclear. But at the same time, North Korea has engaged in international institutions such as environment institutions. So I'm very expected to hear these panels about these issues. Let me briefly introduce our presenters and discussant today. Interestingly, all these three speakers are from Germany. Germany is one of the most important partner to the North Korea. At the same time, especially German NGO, non-governmental organization, has engaged for a long time with North Korea humanitarian aid. First, Dr. Eric Balbach from German Institute for International and Security Affairs in Berlin, so-called Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik. He is one of the most outstanding experts in Germany, focusing on the North Korean foreign policies and South Korean foreign policies. And he has also researched on these issues, international environment institutions by the North Korean engagement. And second presenter is Sang-gu Kim. Actually, he is participating via Zoom today. And Dr. Sang-gu Kim from Freie Universität Berlin, and he has worked for a long time on the energy and environment policies and reunification policies in the Korean Peninsula. And our last but not least presenter, Dr. Bernhard Zelliger, resident representative of the Hans Zeidel Foundation here in Seoul. He has also has worked for a long time with this environment engagement from the North Korean side. And he has led the implementation of project improvement of rural living conditions through healthy forests, establishment of training for sustainable forests in DPRK, and also a project on the conservation and wise use of wetlands. And finally, our discussant today is Ms. Hae-sun Do from the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership. She is currently leading the overall programmatic works of EAAFP, including regional transboundary cooperation projects, communications with 39 partners, including North Korea. So I'm very happy to have all of you here today. And each presenter has 15 minutes time slot for your presentation, and the same goes for the discussant. It means 5 minutes for each presenter, and then totally 15 minutes for the discussant. So we will have a first round of presentations and discussion, and then we will have a second round for the speakers to react to the comments. And after that, I will open the floor for the further discussions. For the online audiences, if you try to upload your questions, then you can use the Q&A link by clicking the Q&A link. So please feel free to write your questions on the internet site. So yes, please, the floor is yours, Eric.
Yes, thank you so much. And also from my side, once again, thank you very much to the Ministry of Unification for putting this excellent event here together and providing us the opportunity to present here today. Today's presentation is part of a wider research project I'm conducting with my colleague, Dr. Kim Sang-guk. We are looking at the institutional dynamics at play in North Korea's engagement with international environmental institutions. Today's focus will be on some of the interim results, focusing mainly on 3 points. You can see here, this is the central reasons for North Korea's engagement with international environmental institutions. So what is behind it, some structural challenges, and some major takeaways. And I'm, of course, very happy to discuss these things with you. So let me start by briefly setting the context. As my colleague Dr. Chung just said, amidst the closing of many channels of communications in the field of security, Pyongyang has proven itself nonetheless willing to engage with the international community on a host of environmental issues, including the global fight against climate change. As one Western observer put it, there is no other area in which North Korea wishes for and pursues international cooperation with such a proactive and comparatively open attitude as it does on environmental policy. North Korea started taking part in multilateral platforms on environment and climate change since the mid-90s, which also marked the starting point of what we could call its climate diplomacy. As of today, you can see this on the slide here, North Korea is a signatory to the majority of key international accords on environmental and climate change issues, including the Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, and the 2016 Paris Agreement. As a signatory to the UNFCCC, Pyongyang even sent a small, let's say, delegation to the 2021 UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. I will come back to this in a second. We could argue that climate change is one of the few areas where we can talk to the North Koreans without there being an overtly ideological edge. And I think they are genuinely concerned about the impact that climate events have on the country. This concern is also reflected in statements by Kim Jong-un personally, who called for urgent action on climate change, which he described as a serious danger that had become significantly higher in recent years. So what are the reasons for this North Korean engagement while it resists to engage with the international community in virtually all other issue areas? I think we can start here with 3 major reasons. The first and arguably the most obvious one is North Korea's increasing vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. While internal policy failures have, of course, also played a role in the successively deterioration of North Korea's land-based, its nature and ecosystem, climate change and also aberrational weather also has a dramatic impact on the situation in North Korea. The country's inability to prevent, withstand, or rebuild after these events makes it exceptionally vulnerable. In fact, North Korea has been increasingly affected by natural disasters, including early summer droughts, late summer storms and floods, which have negatively impacted crops, for example, as well. As you all know, food insecurity has prevailed over the past 3 decades. In 2019, North Korea stood out as the worst hit country by typhoons in all of Asia, and according to the Asian Disaster Reduction Center, 4 out of 10 North Koreans were immediately impacted by storms in 2019 alone. In 2020, North Korea was hit by 3 major typhoons within a span of just 3 weeks, and over the previous 2.5 decades, there have been only 4 years during which no major flood events were recorded. The North Korean Ministry of Land and Environmental Protection estimates that North Korea's average temperature rose by nearly 2 degrees Celsius within the last 15 to 60 years. So already in 2013, the German Watch's Climate Risk Index, North Korea was judged to be the 7th hardest hit by climate-related extreme weather events out of 179 nations during the period between 1992 and 2011. North Korea has recognized not only the economic but also the potential political risks of these developments, and it is indeed trying to actively address these challenges. In January 2020, at the 5th plenary meeting of the 7th Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, Kim Jong-un emphasized the need to establish a well-structured national crisis control system against natural disasters, and a year later he asserted that severe natural disasters that hit the country every year were, quote, severe obstacles to the economic work of the country. More recently, at the meeting of the Political Bureau in September 2021, he argued that all cities and counties should make their areas safe from natural disasters. And this political priority is, of course, also reflected in some concrete actions. For example, some measures have been taken recently within the framework of a government disaster management capability plan for 2019 to 2030, the so-called National Disaster Risk Reduction Strategy. So while climate change poses a real environmental but also a political threat to North Korea, engaging with the UNFCCC and also other environmental institutions also provides some financial opportunities to North Korea. We should not overlook this. So following the ratification of the UNFCCC, for example, North Korea received both financial and technological assistance from more advanced countries, and also relied on foreign cooperation and outside assistance to carry out major national capacity building projects to fight climate change. This assistance was and is an indispensable element of North Korea's climate change adaptation and mitigation policies. As you can see here, a third factor, I already addressed this briefly, is the direct link between environmental challenges and the question of political and regime stability, as climate change impacts will necessarily and inevitably affect the economic, political and social dynamics of all the human systems that are nested within it. And this observation, of course, is especially pertinent to weak states like North Korea, where climate change impacts have the capacity to multiply pre-existing political and socio-economic weaknesses. So while there is a strong interest on the side of the North Koreans to participate in and benefit from its participation with the UNFCCC and other environmental institutions, there are also a number of structural difficulties for the DPRK to participate to the extent either it wishes or we would expect it. On the one hand, and certainly most notably, North Korea is faced with financial burdens that seem to hamper a broader participation. This is not least reflected by the comparatively small delegations North Korea has sent to the annual COP meetings, for example. So while some meetings, and especially the COP meeting in Paris, have seen larger delegations at times, usually North Korea sends about 3 participants to those meetings, while experts, for example, from the Ministry of Land and Environmental Protection or the NECC have occasionally been part of these delegations. Very often, North Korea's delegation was constituted by its local embassy staff. In fact, on numerous occasions, the travel and accommodation costs of the North Korean delegations have been funded by third parties, and I will come back to the role of third parties in this regard in a second. A second structural challenge here, of course, are the international sanctions and the COVID-related restrictions, mainly the travel restrictions imposed by the North Koreans themselves. As you know, North Korea went into a national lockdown as early as January 2020, following the outbreak of the global COVID-19 pandemic. And this, of course, poses an additional burden to engage with international institutions, let's say on a more professional level. Sending local embassy staff can be helpful, but of course, it is often not enough to engage in expert discussions. So while North Korea's overall international engagement saw a sharp decrease following the initiation of the national lockdown, it is notable that North Korea nevertheless sent small delegations to the COP meeting in 2021, albeit this was constituted, as I said, by national embassy staff. Let me finish now with 2 major takeaways. I already mentioned the significance of third parties. I think in order to understand North Korea's interaction with international environmental institutions, such as the UNFCCC, it is imperative to address the role and significance of subsidiary institutions, which refers here to those institutions that aided and supported North Korea in its participation with said institutions. The role of these third parties is crucial in fostering North Korea's engagement in this regard. They support North Korean officials in the creation of necessary reports. They finance participation of North Korean experts and/or officials to particular meetings, and they support North Korean institutions in creating proposals for funding or in establishing particular projects and initiatives on the ground. And I'm very happy that we have Dr. Seliger here in this panel today, who can basically give us some first-hand information in this regard. For instance, the government of the DPRK has worked with a global environmental facility and various other international and national implementing partners to support readiness and planning activities linked to multilateral environmental agreements, including the UNFCCC. Of particular importance have been the UN agencies operating in Pyongyang, especially UNDP, UNEP and FAO, who have repeatedly acted as facilitators and implementation partners on the ground, but also political foundations operating in North Korea. Like I said, the German Hans Seidel Foundation played a particularly crucial role in this regard, also in the context of knowledge transfer, realizing particular projects such as an EU-funded reforestation project a couple of years ago, I think it was, and have been crucial and a crucial partner for the DPRK in this regard. As I said, there is, I think, a crucial lesson to learn from this, a crucial takeaway if we look at North Korea's participation in international environmental institutions. And we have this debate, especially in Europe and also in parts of the US, that is basically to refer to like a functional framework, functionalist framework, as we could start with cooperating with North Korea on the environmental issue areas and then move up to more, let's say, hard security issues. And I think we should be really careful about this, as it was my experience. I'm eager to hear your expertise on this matter, as was my experience that North Korea separates its engagement on environmental issues by and large from its broader security engagement or lack thereof. So we should not see North Korea's participation in environmental issues as a springboard to a greater security engagement of the North Korea. It is ultimately in our own interest also that North Korea joins the global fight against climate change, biodiversity, coastal management, and a range of other issues. And we too should not see this as a functionalist issue to gain access, so to say, or to re-engage the North Koreans on this front and then hope for a broader security engagement with the North Koreans, as both the North Koreans but also we should see this as a separate issue and should focus on things that are of importance to us as well. Just think about the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy, which pushes these issues of especially environmental issues as well, non-traditional security issues, climate change. And this is something we can foster cooperation with the North Koreans. But we should not see this, like I said, as a springboard to a broader security engagement. I stop here as my time is over, and I'm happy to come back with questions and discuss questions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric, for your wonderful presentation, and some questions already raised by Dr. Eric Baibach. And then the second presenter is Dr. Kim Sang-guk from Berlin, I think, through Zoom. Are you there? Can you hear me?
예, 잘 들립니다. 잘 들리세요?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, floor is yours.
네, 오늘 말씀 감사합니다. 제가 발표할 내용은 지금
Today, my presentation is on a case study in the research project mentioned by Professor Bach. And that is why I think the order of presentation is very reasonable. And Dr. Zelliger was actually on the ground trying to implement this project, so I think this panel is very apt. I would like to say from the get-go that environmental issues, especially in former East Germany and Germany, was considered a political uncertainty factor. So environmental issues in the former East German system was considered an issue of general survival that transcended class and region. And they felt that this could be a source of political discontent and complaint. And since unification, national parks were made and many efforts were made to improve the environment from the bottom up. And from this perspective, the theme of environment doesn't stop there. Its boundaries are actually much larger. The environment holds great potential for a lot of development and growth in a lot of different areas. Today, I'm going to talk about an inter-Korean project to preserve tidal flatlands. It has not been actually implemented, but by envisioning this, we can identify similarities and dissimilarities, and we can think about what type of international cooperation we can think of should this take off. We were joined by Korea's ecological landscape research. We carried out the academic research. I was in charge of facilitating the academic research with the German side. The title of my presentation is A Single Ecosystem Striving for Co-Prosperity. So as you can see here on the map, this is the Wadden Sea. And this area has been inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List. As you can see, it spans from Denmark to Germany to the Netherlands, and these three countries share this zone. And so inevitably, these three countries must cooperate to manage this area. As I mentioned earlier, it is inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List. It is a World Natural Heritage, and it is the largest tidal flat system in the world where the ecosystem circular process happens without any interruptions. As I mentioned earlier, Germany, Denmark, and Netherlands, these three countries manage this site together. The coastline spans 500 kilometers, and the tideland covers around 11,500 square kilometers. And to jointly manage this site, the three countries have a joint management secretariat, which is located in Germany, and there is also a university. It is in charge of research and education, so it's an institution that is in charge of research and education. They also have a program for joint monitoring and evaluation, and every year a forum is held and a quality status report is published to look at how it is being managed, and they have a very close cooperation model, and I think this has implications for Korea's Yellow Sea. As you can see, this area is shared by China, the DPRK, and Korea, South Korea. And parts of this zone or area has been inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. In 2019, the Yellow Bohai Gulf of China was inscribed, and in 2021, Korea's Kepbal or tidal flat was inscribed. And as you can see, they also share one maritime ecosystem, but unlike the Wadden Sea, each of these three countries have separate management systems. But now, as I mentioned earlier, since areas in China and South Korea have been inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List, there is a need for a joint management system. And North Korea has, in fact, made its own efforts to preserve its tideland and wetlands. And so you can see that the legal framework is already there. They enacted the Environmental Protection Act in 1986. They also have a Maritime Contamination Prevention Act, and they have a Evaluation Impact Assessment Law. And they also have a law enacted regarding waste and waste treatment. So there is a legal framework in North Korea. And if you look at the policy direction to protect the wetlands, they have a policy that aims to prevent destruction to ecosystems in terms of development projects. So they do carry out environmental impact assessments. They have designated wetland protection zones. They have management plans and implementations. They carry out regular surveys. And so this serves as a foundation for future joint cooperation and management. And they do also receive some support from the outside to carry out these activities as well. So here you can see the key wetlands and protection areas. This area is very important, and as the next or our discussant will know, this is important in protection migratory birds as well. So they have 13 laws to protect this area, and they have 3 related government ministries and agencies that are in charge of this area, 16 protection zones for migratory birds, and 70 key wetlands. And they have designated more than 40 sites for maritime protection, and this spans 958 square kilometers. And it was newly designated in 2018 the Kumgang Mountain Biosphere nuclear reserve, and they also offer maritime protection. So, in short, North Korea is in line with international trends and is operating many systems to protect certain areas based on its own laws. And I'm sure Dr. Zeliger knows more about this than me. He is the expert, but you can see that North Korea is actively taking part in environmental institutions, global environmental institutions. It joined IUCN in 2017, and it also joined the RAMSAR Convention in 2018, and it also joined the EAAFP in 2018. And also domestically, they are engaging in diverse activities to build capacity. They carried out their own forum, and they have carried out workshops on World Biodiversity Day and Migratory Bird Day, and they have also held forums on how to protect the tidal lands and migratory birds, and how to preserve wetlands. So you can see that they have great potential of taking advantage of international support, and they're also looking at the possibilities. But one of the biggest issues in North Korea is that they are moving ahead with the large-scale land reclamation projects because of the food shortage. So the scope and speed is quite significant. So that is why it is all the more urgent to engage in this cooperation to protect the tidal flatland and wetlands. As you can see in this photo, in 2016 to 2018, you can see how much land was reclaimed. So these projects, these land reclamation projects, are really being proceeded at breakneck speed. So North Korea, in order to resolve its food shortage, is engaging in these land reclamation projects, and that much damage is being, of course, done to tidal flatlands. So we need to attempt to solve or provide solutions for the fundamental problem that is the food shortage issue. In the previous session, I understand that it was about deforestation, and I think the fundamental problem that exacerbated deforestation is the food shortage and the food problem in North Korea. So we need to provide a structure where the arable land is not in competition with the ecosystem, and this is where there is an urgency. Currently, around North Korea is considering a land reclamation project that spans around 3,000 square kilometers, and that is around 50% of total arable land. And this is tantamount to a natural disaster, so that is why we need international cooperation. So North Korea's food shortage, in short, can trigger a risk to biodiversity at the global level. So I have to say I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to solve the food shortage issue in North Korea. If they go ahead with these land reclamation projects, it will sever a link in the global ecosystem, and I'm sure many people that are in the know about the environment will know this. And so of course, there are other factors that are exacerbating the food shortage system. Those are the sanctions and COVID-19. And these factors are exacerbating the system situation by 5- and 10-fold. And so this is also having a negative impact on climate change. So when we take into consider climate change and damage to the ecosystem, we need to quickly build a platform and a system to provide support for North Korea to preserve its tidal flatlands. So North Korea does have plans, and they have made urgent requests for support. They have told us that they need workshops and seminars to raise awareness. They have also requested capacity building programs as well. We have shown them the model of Wadden Sea, and we have suggested that this is a possible way forward. And we also need to work with them to develop a plan to manage key wetlands. And we also need to develop training programs and education material. This was also an urgent request by North Korea. And this was a request made when we met with North Korean counterparts. And they're also very deeply interested in developing ecotourism programs. And they also need to enhance cooperation in international initiatives such as the EAAFP. I'm sure the discussant will be able to elaborate on this later on. Now, there is a great need to build capacity regarding wetland preservation. So they took part in workshops related to this topic. And Dr. Zeliger has contributed in building a framework for at least this type of cooperation where North Korea takes part in workshops. And so there is a need for these three countries to collaborate because the Yellow Sea Ketbal is a stopover site for migratory birds. And the tidal flatlands actually have a definitive impact on the survival of the migratory birds. And so there is demand in Korea and North Korea and China regarding this area. And this makes an ideal case for trilateral cooperation. As mentioned earlier, environmental issues do not spill over that easily to political issues. But if we have or build experience of cooperation, then I think that experience is necessary, almost essential in engaging in other cooperation down the road. It's about building know-how, and it's about opening the possibility of future cooperation. And as mentioned, China and Korea have inscribed this area on the World Natural Heritage, and we need to provide support for North Korea to do the same. And we need to engage in exchange and cooperation in phases. So in the first phase, we would have experts visit the site and provide capacity building programs. In the second phase, we would carry out R&D. And here are the significance of such cooperation. It's a non-political issue, and there is enhanced access to the issue. And again, this is being asked and demanded by the international community. They are demanding trilateral cooperation. And we have had parties invite North Korea to workshops, and the response was positive. But due to COVID, we have struggled to keep this sort of cooperation ongoing. And I think if we collaborate with the Wadden Sea Secretariat, then we would be able to move along. And Despite COVID, and MOU was signed to build a framework and foundation and platform for future cooperation. Here, you can see the Korean side participant at the Wadden site, and this is showing the exchange that went on. And I think that this model of exchange could be applied to North Korea as well. And we need to actively review applying the Wadden Sea model in the Yellow Sea, and I think that this is needed because of the risk to the global ecosystem out of North Korea. I sped through my presentation because we are pressed for time, but I look forward to more in-depth discussions during the discussion portion of our session.
Presentation, Dr. Kim. Yeah, he emphasized the issue itself, the environment issues, not only issue itself, but also for the further cooperation program for the partnerships. And he also raised some discussion point with Eric and Dr. Zeliger. And yeah, the third presenter, Dr. Zeliger. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And first of all, Eric, Dr. Balbach, thank you for putting together this interesting panel. And I will, I'd love to discuss only what Kim Il-sung and the people of the world greet him. That was maybe an exaggeration and a propaganda picture, but it was not far from truth. In the past, North Korea was more or less integrated in the socialist bloc. It was part of the non-aligned movement, a very active part, and it had its own projects. It had even development aid. It had building of hospitals, a lot of military cooperation, naturally, with countries in the third world. It was not an isolated state. But all that changed, as you know, in the period since 1989, which we might call a period really of great disintegration in various waves, when North Korea, for reasons of poverty and the breakdown of the socialist blocs, for reasons of developing the nuclear program, and then the sanctions related to this became completely disintegrated from the rest of the world. So why should we work in this one field of environment on cooperation or on reintegration of North Korea rather? And I think there's quite a lot of reasons which are important for that, namely the idea that there would be a collapse through isolating North Korea did not prove to be true. North Korea became more dangerous maybe, became more unpredictable, but certainly it did not collapse, which actually cannot work as long as there's China there. So it's naive in a way to focus on isolation of North Korea. That doesn't mean sanctions are not necessary, but it means that we cannot expect North Korea to change from this. Rather, it becomes more difficult and dangerous, and we need to have at least some channels of communication. Though, as it was rightly pointed out, there's no way to have this benign view to say, okay, once we cooperate in environment, then we cooperate maybe on food, and then in the end, we all live peaceful together. That also doesn't work. And then North Korea is not a monolithic state. We have actors, and one of them is our partner, the Ministry of Land and Environment Protection, who have their own agenda and who can be empowered. And we think really that is very important to empower these partners, and sharing knowledge is the best way to do so. And clearly we have also this European and German experience where we had different spheres, a political one, but also one of human exchanges, economy, etc., and where we were most successful in separating them. And if we could create a sphere where we can cooperate on environment, that might be well worth, even if it's for international reasons, for the global fight, let's say for biodiversity, what Dr. Kim said, this interconnection of the tidal flats in the Yellow Sea. That is the reason. There's a Hanbando reason, a Korean Peninsula reason to reforest, for example, because it will also reduce disasters to some extent in South Korea, and so on. So there are many reasons to keep up. And there are some principles clearly which are related. I cannot go into everything. Maybe those who are interested, I can send them also the presentation. So, for example, it should be a transparent interaction, and we should take North Koreans serious as partners, not as objects of destabilization or so, but on the other hand, we also want really to help them seeing our view of the world. So much said maybe. We did a lot of projects since 2003 in North Korea, but in the end we worked more and more on this field of wetlands and biodiversity, and that's what I want to talk about today. Actually, the work we did was not new. As Dr. Balbach said, until 2007 there was a GEF facility, the Global Environmental Facility Project, where, among others, they started with work on wetlands and also, for example, designated Moyang-san as a biosphere reserve. However, that money came from Japan, and in 2007 there was finally an end of that. And then for 8 years there was a hiatus, nothing happened, so to speak, while in the region there were a lot of important movements for greater institutionalization, and one was the Flyway partnership we talk about today. To be very careful, because Ms. Go knows everything about that and hears us now, so I have to say only right things here. But the Flyway partnership went on, and then in 2015 a group of international actors, including the WWF and the Flyway partnership itself, the RAMSAR Foundation, and we and IUCN and Hong Kong bird watching societies and others came together and said, let's work again on making North Korea part of that. And fortunately it was then successful. I will really go briefly through this. So North Korea became the 170th member of the RAMSAR Convention of Wetlands, and finally the 35th member of the Flyway Partnership. That actually, and I think I'm allowed to say that here, they tried to become a member 2017 first, and South Korea blocked it. It needs unanimity, the decision, and South Korea was the only state in Singapore. And it was quite a backlash for our partners, because it was a great loss of faith in a way. I'm happy they still could go on the next year, when here was a change of government and a different view of that we could go on with this. This was very good. How did we do that? Why do we work of all the things on wetlands? And Professor Kim said something there which I not totally agree with. Actually, naturally, food security is a very, very important issue. But wetlands are, in my opinion, not antagonistic to that. And then that's why actually the RAMSAR Foundation is a work on the wise use of wetlands. It's not on the protection of wetlands or on forbidding people to use wetlands. It's on the wise use of wetlands. And if you look, the Korean tidal flats are incredibly productive, the whole Yellow Sea tidal flat, also in terms of livelihood. If you see what livelihood people can take from seafood, for example, which all disappears if you have a seawall there and then have another 20, 50, 100 hectares of rice fields maybe. So we really think that the wetlands are not only important for biodiversity, but also for the livelihood of people and for climate change mitigation. I'm a really great fan of our forest projects, but I have to say wetlands are better than forests. Tidal flats are incredibly in storing CO2. It's not yet financeable, or it's not yet, you cannot make dollars easily out of that, but it is a point. And then North Korea, fortunately, had its own history of nature protection, following the socialist model that for a long time protected areas, though the implementation was often problematic and they were not well cared for. And so that was another point. And the third point, which is not unimportant, simply there are not many fields we can work with North Korea in. It's one of the very few fields which are unsanctioned and which are basically cheered by the international community. So we started to work with them on this conservation and wise use of wetlands. And actually, we did not really separate and say we work on RAMSAR or we work on Flyway partnership, work on IUCN membership. It was all for us the same, so to speak. We worked on a package there, to say we want with them to have them comprehensively engaging in this one field. And that means then the RAMSAR, the designation of RAMSAR sites, the creation of a wetland inventory, it was quite a thing to do, capacity building, and then through this, the reintegration into international environmental networks, integration or reintegration. The wetland inventory actually was for us really highlight there because we first of all participated in East Coast surveys, so it was super interesting to go to these remote areas. But it was also interesting, North Korea included in their inventory, which is publicly available on the internet, 5 or 6 sites, I think, directly in the DMZ. And the data created there was never seen before because the DMZ is a military area. So that also enhanced our data and our understanding of the issues. So the membership in the Flyway Partnership and in the RAMSAR Convention was in a way a recognition of these efforts. It took us 2 to 3 years, basically 3 to 4 years to finish that. But it was also new responsibilities for them, and that's what I think is very important. Namely, for example, reporting responsibilities that they have to report, and clearly to go to the COPs. We'll see the last years were difficult with COVID, but that will soon change, I hope. Next year we have a COP in Brisbane. I will see if of the Flyway Partnership, if our partners can participate there. I hope so. And this international cooperation is really a key. And here is one of the, it was a species-related workshop in China on the bear spot shot. And you see there the North Korean representative and Ms. Do, who is a South Korean national, in the small picture, working together with the Chinese head of this meeting on issues. So that is also for us a very important issue, that international cooperation also includes, to some extent, North-South cooperation. Clearly not in a very broad way, but it is a place where North and South Korea can meet, and that's why it's important for us. I will skip this one here. I will just say one thing. The North Koreans themselves, they needed a lot of capacity building, but also what we call SEPA, that means awareness raising. We went regularly to the trade fair in Rason, and first they really, people didn't, it's a place where people of Rason, also normal people, can a little bit experience what's going on. And they really asked us, do you sell these birds? Can we eat them or so? But now, when we were there last time, 2019, the mayor comes and says, you are the people with the flyways. And don't forget, the people of Rason never ever saw any of these birds or any of these very remote wetlands. They don't go in the Saturday or Sunday with their car to the wetlands like the South Koreans. They go to Suncheon. North Koreans can't do that. So it was really something very new for them. And on the national level, it was the same. So we supported, for example, these wetland site flyers or these species flyers on the scaly-sided merganders or so, did workshops on that, etc. And we're very happy all of these productions are basically from the Corona time. So they are not financed by us, not instigated by us. That's what the North Koreans do, showing that though there might be one aspect that a foreign entity finances them and tells them, let's work on this or that together, but the work is going on, which is very good. It's their own work on wetlands, and it's something they did, and we are very happy with that, to see that. That they have a certain intrinsic interest in that. What's the interest that we could discuss, and it's also part of the brief they have as a ministry, and it's maybe part also of their prestige to have these sites, the recognition. That's the point we sometimes forget. It's not nice to be a diplomat in Geneva and only work on human rights and security issues, where you always get something on your head. It's much better also to be part of the RAMSAR side, where people say, wow, you are a partner, welcome. So this normality on a purely human level is, I think, very important. I will not talk about these wetlands. Could say many things about this. I want to say some things here. because we are really in the time going on, which I find very important. So first of all, the work with North Korea there, it was growing organically. We didn't have a fixed plan and say, well, we want to achieve this and this and this goal. We had some idea, we want to reintegrate them into networks. And from that, many other things came. For example, okay, I have to go back one more, I was too fast. The SDG paradigm. You might say, SDG, what does that mean? It's a lot of blah, blah. You find everything in these goals. For us, they are helpful. Why? Theoretically, when we work on wetlands, maybe we work on goal 14 and 15, but North Korea embraced SDG goals, and that means we can also branch out a little bit. For example, this question of livelihood. North Korea is very difficult with partners. You have one partner only. We cannot say, oh, let's meet another person or let's do another project. They will not agree with it. But as part of SDG, we can a little bit branch out and say, as part of work on SDGs, let's do a project to protect, let's say, birds, but also protect livelihood or improve livelihood of people. So for us, that was very helpful, actually. And that's the opportunities. You find opportunities. When you meet, you find opportunities. And that's what I want to say our colleagues from South Korea. There's so many opportunities there. Go to international meetings with them and don't wait for your very excellent Minister of Unification to give you the permit. He will do so, hopefully, but it's really important that the meetings take place. Not that we always talk about North Korea, but that we talk with them. I mean, here it's also, there's no North Korean here. It's not possible, I know, but still it's really a big problem that we talk more about North Korea than with North Korea. And then for us, Ms. Do, please here, work with Flyway partnership was particularly successful, but we didn't make a distinction to work on wetlands, migratory birds, biodiversity. We take it as it is. And we also work on birds which are not covered now with the Flyway. There's exciting other biodiversity issues in the country which cover maybe small birds or so. But we should take these opportunities. And the work was... Hello? Okay. The work was not independent from high politics. In that sense, I said that, for example, once they refused membership for EAAFP for the North Koreans because South Korea didn't want it that time, but it became gradually less dependent. So I don't say we already created this sphere of the apolitical cooperation, but it becomes bigger, certainly. For example, also with the UNFCCC, we brought them there first to Krakow and Madrid, and now it becomes a little more routine for them, a matter, and clearly there's a precedent, which is very important in bureaucracies all over the world. When they say, we have been there last year and the year before and the year before, so this year we also go. It becomes a little more routine, a little more broader field of cooperation. And then for us it was very important, the broad appeal of the EAAFP. There were 18 governments and more than 20 NGO now helps. By the way, we are also a member of it, and I'm very happy for that. So we can have, on the one hand, the broad appeal, that is, North Korea can a little bit hide among the other states. It would be much more difficult to say, for example, the Tidal C project, which we work on now, China, North Korea, South Korea, it's a very intense thing. If we have 20 governments or 10 governments, it's much easier for them. But also then we can have in that smaller focus, for example, on this one bird, the so-called scaly-sided merganser, on the yellow sea tidal flags, etc. That gives us a lot of flexibility. And finally, we hope that work within the EAAFP might in the future allow broader activities on the SDG and helps us to build more human bridges among countries. I mean, now it's for us, North Korea, the focus, and that's also our reason we are working here, but we think also about Russia. In this one case with the scaly-sided mergansers, these animals, they dare to fly to Russia, even now, if there's war, but they still breed there. And we still have to work with them on that. And that's, I think, good to have these bridges there, whatever politics is. I don't say politics plays no role. For us, it plays also a role. We are a foundation for democracy and human rights, but we want to have these bridges because we believe firmly it's better than to have them isolated. And that's how the work comes, and I'm very happy also that we all work together on these issues. And we will go with the EAAFP to the Wadden in October, but unfortunately without the North Koreans. That will be maybe next year or the year after. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation, Dr. Jalligo. I'm sorry for this time limitation, but we have a lot of discussion points here, and then we invite our discussant today, and then we will talk about this very interesting discussion point. Ms. Stowe?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the Minister of Unification of Korean Government and German Institute for the International and Security Affairs, and RAMSAR Foundation for the invitation to this side event. As per request by organizer, I will speak in English, so if there are Korean audience, please have another ear the interpreter machine. Unfortunately, I cannot see the audience now, so I don't know what are the reaction, but I will try my best to accommodate it as much as possible. And then hope that the forum itself and the session gave you another insight, new insight on the potential environment cooperation with North Korea through international organization. Personally, actually, it's very meaningful that I can join here as a South Korean working at the international organization. That I really work with and deal with a different country diplomatically, including our North Korean counterpartner. Because I also had experience of feeling a little bit of the barrier as a South Korean to working with North Korean counterpartner before they're joining to our partnership in 2018. As well, we have no reason. We had no reason to speak together. I had never met them. And then that was a huge barrier as a South Korea international organization worker. But I'm very pleased to see that this kind of environment cooperation agenda has brought and that slowly growing and growing. And even during today's Korean Global Forum, I've seen that 3 to 4 sessions are related to the environment already. So it's a very positive sign I could say and I would dare to say. And then I also think that the current situation for the Korean government is similar and eager to have some linkage and have a good relationship with them, but it's not easy. And that's what I had feared before. And I think I won't repeat and summarize the point which were covered from different presenters. And then thank you for Professor Kim and Dr. Seldiga especially because they cover of our mission very comprehensively and then clearly that's our partnership work towards. So thank you again for that. But based on the context, I want to re-emphasize what we might need to remember and the focus, especially for the Korean stakeholder, who is the host and the main audience and the stakeholder based on our experience. So I wanted to share something first, which is back to the 6 years before. My first impression with them, who is a Ministry of the Land and Environment Protection of North Korean counterparts, who have been mentioned many times in the previous presentation, my impression was, wow, they're very enthusiastic. And wow, they know what they want. And they want to learn the good practice from everywhere, not only from one. They wanted to gather everything from everywhere and then to bring it and reflect to their place. As Eric pointed out very clearly, they know there is an immediate gain from its participation with us, international organization, I can say, and the suffering from the vulnerability despite the sanction and political conflict. I still remember that they were very hesitant to talk to me when I first introduced myself at the beginning. But at some point, we agreed to work together. At the end of the conversation, we agree, okay, I'm the South Korea, but I'm working for the conservation and for the bird, and then we share it. And I'm not working only for your country, and we work for the whole country. At the end, so we end up to work together and for conservation and the cooperation, ultimately contribution toward the biodiversity nature. And so for the last 4 years, I'm working here, and we've been really able to advance lots of the cooperation, lots of story, and implement a different scale of the activity and project together as a step of international organization. Of course, I had a little doubt about their intention, a little bit. I wanted to carefully say, but the more I talk and the more I heard what they wanted, I was quite convinced, because they are so enthusiastic, and so does the other. And I also want to carefully say that they now, at least in our conservation field, they become the most welcome country for many researchers, some international organizations, and the country, and conservationists who wanted to work with, because I think everyone probably knows that, ironically, they were not able to foster economic development for the long years because of many reasons. Instead, they were able to safeguard nature and the biodiversity, which has become a treasure, and we say opportunity, and then in the future might be a recognizable heritage, as Professor Kim presented. Well, followed by the series of the World Heritage Inscription for the Gappa in Korea and the Red Yellow Sea Coastal Site in China, which are planning to expand more for the long-term goal. China already submitted another 11 site application for the World Heritage Site in early this year. And the Korean government, the Cultural Heritage Administration, also now just start the preparation for the phase 2 nomination. It means that, as Mr. Kim really gave the big picture of this Water and Sea cooperation, while to be honest, many of the international community and the many stakeholders have really started dreaming about this transboundary cooperation, which couldn't think about it in maybe their life and in our life. Well, with the focus on the protection of wetland, who would think about it, that opportunity? And so I think I'm not saying that this is transboundary cooperation is only for the bird. It would cover other migratory species like a spotted seal, which is in Incheon, but we have not really officially found it in North Korea, but high likely, right? There's so many. Maybe there are some unfound. Moreover, we touch on base that Dr. Selika mentioned that the benefit for the local community. I'm very pleased that I can visit the Water and Sea in October to see what really they gain, but the local community will gain for it. It's not only for South Korea, it's for North Korea and China and the general public. Also might be able to manage the share this sea altogether, regardless of unpredictable fertile situation in the future. Never knows, we cannot really predict it. But what I really wanted to highlight here is really based on how I face is we really should keep in mind that when we talk about the possible cooperation, especially for the Korean stakeholder, we need to know that what they would like to get support and assistance with from somewhere, and what they need and expect it, not what we and you want to cooperate with and what kind of benefit might get out of it. Also, it can be another small and the big point is it can be a small scale. As you've seen that they love to produce a different promotion material and video, and they're having a different capacity building and training education program. But in many cases, people who really want to cooperate with North Korea, they're very ambitious to bond with them immediately, and then making a big scale of the project and the huge recognition out of it. But if I will get to that point, another point, but so far I would say the most of successful case which helped North Korea, it was quite small size. We should really know that. And then that is really the step. And then if we wanted to consider, and the Korean government to consider to giving some support, need to look back really what they wanted to get. So as we were in Korean Peace Forum, I would like to also update that at the international community, the second Yellow Sea situation analysis paper led by IUCN with the expert group will be released in November during the RAMSAR COP, which will enable you to understand the past, current, and future situation in Yellow Sea with the focus on the wetland. Well, it means that this value of the importance of Yellow Sea has nothing to add on it, as Professor Kim said. It's just very, just cannot say, in the Flyway. Well, this Flyway, the 50 million birds rely on. That is a fact. So likewise, I would like to suggest that, excuse me, the Korean government probably need to start analyzing what they can offer immediately, or can cooperate in the long term for the environmental cooperation. More importantly, I don't know whether you will accept it or not, but we should protect what we have and conserve what we can as much if we really seriously consider the environmental cooperation. Well, let me give you a little example since I only have 5 minutes to go. Well, we have common species of the bird and the plant and other on the both sides in Korea and North Korea, and some are migrating. That is the fact we already talked about it. Since most of the audience are Korean, I wanted to bring this species, crane. I think you must have heard the word of the crane, right? We normally call hawk or drummy. But do you know that majority of the population of the species are relied on around the DMZ and CCZ currently? I don't think so many people would know that unless you are really, really liking it. When we think about North Korea, what we can think about is, what can you think about the word? Nuclear, word, Kim Jong-un. But normally not really many positive words from the many, especially from general public. But probably this microspecies might bring the peace and bridge. Well, and then maybe can change the people's perspective. I would say general public perspective. And this crane is in danger. What used to be in the side of North Korea before, but because of some development and the military the issue, that they moved to our side, South Korean side, because it has a similar characteristic of the habitat. The ecosystem know where to go and then where to stay. And one day, if we unify and have a chance to manage and protect around the DMZ, although we talk about the yellow coastal line, but having the remain biodiversity will be very crucial, actually, when we talk about environmental cooperation. From now on, we shouldn't destroy that, remain the land. I won't go deep because this is not about the protection of the habitat. But what I want to say, that's what we need to aim toward first. I also totally agree with the word from the Dr. Seliger that in the future we allow broader activity on SDG and will help to build a human bridges among the country beyond North Korea with Russia, China, other. But the problem is the general public doesn't understand so much yet, and the world doesn't care. But highlighting this never raise the point and the meaning, the perspective of the people and mindset can be changed slowly. We shouldn't forget the potential gap of understanding for general public in parallel in the process of this when we talk about the Inter-Korea Peninsula cooperation. I really truly think that, I'm sorry that I got a little bit COVID symptoms, so that's why I'm coughing, excuse. I think the joint environmental cooperation can be our protective barriers from the climate change crisis as well, and the bridge, as I say. Like wetland, Dr. Seliger compared with forestry and the wetland, but I also want to second it. As wetland is now, people start to argue, and in the world, that what are the remains, nature, the place. And then it's now slowly revealed that it has stored a lot of carbon, which is currently actively calculated globally, and then which will be reflected. It means that, back to the point of the tidal flood in the Yellow Sea, we already having that all. Right? So when we talk about climate change, of course, the technical and the scientific research all needed, but protection has to be in parallel together. And at some point, we will have to cooperate together to tackle the crisis together, jointly with North Korea, because we share the same peninsula, same land, to react to all this nature with disaster and diseases. We have the same characteristic. So that's how we can think about it. And another point that I wanted to raise, as you have heard for the last 2 days, and the biggest argument was the best channel to cooperate at this moment, but because the sanction and political swift, but the best still will be through the multilateral arrangement with the third party. As Professor Kim also says, such as like international organization or with other country, through our country or with other country. Well, not only name organization in this section, UNFCCC and the other, North Korea has been involving in a lot of international meeting setting. Well, I will just name that, which we haven't covered, like UN Convention on Combat Desertification, FAO, UNDP, Climate Technology Center and Network, GCF, and UNESCO, and UNEP, and the UNESCO now we are covering. So North Korea has been quite actively engaged in all places and seeking more opportunity. But after losing this sanction letter, and the funding could be expanded larger from the GCF, but can be GEF, ADB, and the World Bank. It do be. So North Korea, especially on the environment sector, I think people will be eager to support if that political situation gone, because it's not touched many places, right? Other places already invested a lot, good way, I think. But anyway, in the future, the North Korea will be very difficult to accept the South Korean direct offer, even if it's a technical support. Then how will Korean government do? I think the bilateral dialogue, I hope that bilateral dialogue will be revised, and maybe all of a sudden, like last time, or it might take some time. I will suggest again that now probably is the best time that we start to prepare, the Korean government to prepare an analysis existing ongoing potential environment activity for or with North Korea by different organizations in the world and in Korea, stakeholders, to know what they have been interested in. Do we have it that? That can be the opportunity. If the Korean government stakeholder wanted, you should be ready, we should be ready, and suggest what they really like. They can be, well, I don't know if it will be agreeable. Thank you, Professor Kim, you already raised your hand. I was taking on that. But I also wanted to say, need to develop flexible and integrated platform, as many other the speaker point out, and develop the strategy for the short, long-term strategy, consider all our past experience and the current expression, and then need to think about carefully how we could indirectly support the North Korean government indirectly. It can be through international aid and program or through the trilateral cooperation, what we cover. And then also we might consider, and Korean government might consider, that how can help the North Korea to begin being in the area we want to cooperate and support for their probably threat, as Professor Kim said, the recurrence issue and lack of the food security. Well, I wanted to give a little bit more example, as the Korean government is one of the biggest donor to the ODA project. I think many all know in the world, right? Biggest. and can try to seek how ODA project will other illegal country could provide the benefit to North Korea. Around, I don't know exact number, let's say around 50 beneficial countries from the ODA sponsorship from Korean government can probably work or offer indirectly what they have gained and learn from us toward North Korea. For example, the capacity building for wetland, water management, restoration project, agriculture area management, or any other skill. But I'm not sure there is an exact platform for like that. Another specific suggestion I want to say in relation to the migratory bird, there is an existing bilateral agreement for the migratory bird among China, Russia, Australia, Korea, and Japan, led by Ministry of Environment by Korean government. That can be the platform. We could try to involve North Korea in the discussion. They are already there, the platform, and then place we can do it, but just we have not to really link that together. It's the same logic, I think. Same logic for the support the future process of inscription of World Heritage Site for tidal flag in North Korea. It will be similar. How will we support? Through the UNESCO or through the international organization? It's really time to think. Not only just visualize in our way, visualize that cannot do it. Just look back at what we have. Okay, to summarize, everyone knows that the role of international organization is mandatory and crucial for the current cooperation, but I also do believe that at some point there will be bilateral dialogue and cooperation. But need to really rebuild the joint effort, hold together with all relevant stakeholders, and they're going toward one goal, and ready for the future positive bilateral dialogue to discuss for inter-Korean Peninsula. Well, that's all I have. Thank you. But sorry that I cannot be there, but I'll be pleased to take a question and then maybe send an email. One of my colleagues is there and in the person at the venue, so please approach it to her on our contact information and other details. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. To. Even though you are not in a good condition, but your passionate discussion is very helpful for this panel, I think. So the second round is starting now, and your response concerning the comments from the Ms. To, what is how to manage these cooperation programs, international organizations' role or bilateral dialogue is better. Yeah, Eric Balbach.
Yeah. I also want to thank Ms. To for her helpful, extremely valuable comments. I think was some great ideas in there. And you know, me as a foreign policy and security analyst, I may be approaching this from a slightly different viewpoint, which might also be helpful and add to the more practical work my colleagues are doing. The question I asked myself, and I think what we have to work on in Europe especially, is how can we raise awareness also in the European Union, in European Union member states, raise awareness and discuss the question, raise political awareness among decision makers that it is in our own interest as well to engage North Korea on these issues, that there is an immediate link between environmental issues and security issues. We see that, and I mentioned this in my brief presentation in the beginning, there is a shift among European Union decision makers as well towards the Indo-Pacific, with an Indo-Pacific strategy now in place. If we read it very carefully, we see that non-traditional security issues, environmental issues, climate change, coastal management issues, they are all part of this Indo-Pacific strategy. But somehow North Korea is not even, let's say, perceived as a potential cooperation partner in this regard. And I think this is where maybe our work comes in, where our role is going to be important to convince people in Europe, in the European Union, in EU member states, in the different ministries, that it is in our own interest and that basically what we are talking about within the framework of the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy, there is a potential partner in North Korea, because by now the only mention of North Korea in the Indo-Pacific strategy is as a sanctions target and as a potential threat to non-proliferation, of course, and due to its nuclear program. And Bernhard Seliger, Dr. Seliger also mentioned this in his presentation. It is vital for us to cooperate with North Korea on issues beyond security matters. And I think this is where we come in and hopefully can maybe contribute a little bit to this.
Okay, then Dr. Kim, I think you have a slightly different opinion to engage in these issues, security and environment issues.
사실적으로 봤을 때 제가 이제 지금 발박 박사님 의견에 동의를 하고요.
I do agree with Dr. Baba, but
이란 레짐과 국제적인 협력의 참여가
international cooperation is about building the know-how for cooperation. As Director Doe said, I think that's what she meant. So if the three parties take part and if they cooperate under the international regime, then the cooperation itself is very stable. North Korea
있었을 때 항상 갈등의 상황이 있었을 때 거기서부터 그렇지만 이것이 다국적이 될 때
I think can engage in more stable cooperation if the cooperation is linked with an international environmental institution. And I talked about the economic benefits of tidelands and wetlands, and I agree with the comment related to this. Korea's 갯벌 is actually home to more species than Wadden Sea, and so it holds great significance, and it does hold value for the fisheries industry as well. And lastly, as Ms. Doe mentioned, the North Koreans are very enthusiastic. I would like to highlight this as well. In 2019, I met with students of Kim Il-sung University in Germany, and I guided a program, and the students were so enthusiastic they were just about to swallow the education material. So I think this enthusiasm is something that South and North Koreans share, and this was what the Germans who observed us said. And the academic exchange between researchers and the elite and the exchange of information, I believe, is crucial. And I think that even post-unification, in order to further grow together, this sort of knowledge and information exchange is very important to bring the level of knowledge and exchange to a similar level. And I think that this is also a very crucial element. As Dr. Zeliger mentioned, I think this sort of trajectory toward growth and development is very important.
Thank you. And Dr. Zeliger, could you compromise these
Absolutely,
ideas?
absolutely. Yeah. And I just want to highlight that I'm very happy that Ms. Do told again, and that's again really to the South Korean side, that small-scale projects are really what is feasible. And if we look again, there's nothing wrong with the audacious plan. There was nothing wrong with the plan to rebuild the whole railway network of North Korea under Moon. There was nothing wrong with the plan 3,000 opening denuclearization. There was nothing wrong with the last meeting of Nomuhyon and Kim Jong-il that time, building a new second Kaesong in Haeju or somewhere. But all of that didn't work. What worked were these small projects and these mini meetings. Yeah, mini meetings. They don't have a big impact, it's true. But it's better to have 100 flowers blooming, 100 mini meetings, then one meeting which never takes place. And it's a little bit this thinking which would be good, and also this, in a way, unfair thing that South Korea should support meetings in third countries, or even where they are not even themselves there, but activities by third partners. Naturally, nobody likes that, to finance a thing and then not even be mentioned, and even be treated wrongly on a political level then, or treated be very vile, like from the sister of the leader. But it's the only way they have. And our European role there, I see really in capacity building and human cooperation. I think that's a point which we can, and I know that Berlin Free University works on that, and other partners too, but also in this field of wetlands, maybe we can do more there. In the forest field, we are working a little bit. We have now 2 students in Eberswalde in Germany, but also in other places, maybe we could do more really in that. And there, I would say our politics is a little too hesitant. I would say it's clear most of the problems are in North Korea. That's also true. To invite a North Korean student group from Kim Il-sung University takes years, and it's very difficult to replicate it regularly. It might work after Corona now, but it's also partly our problem that our institutions and the rules also don't make it always helpful. So we have to work ourselves also on that.
Thank you very much. It is really interesting panel about this North Korean participation in international environment institution, but it just not dealing with the environment issues, but also the cooperation issues in with the North Korea and in the international context. It's very interesting, and I have learned a lot from this panel. And it's time to wrap up. Yes, there's no questions from audience, so it's time. Will you?
I just want to briefly, before you wrap up, I just want to thank the panelists as the organizer of this panel. I want to thank the moderator. I want to thank the Ministry of Unification. And since they are often forgotten in this, I really want to thank the interpreters, who usually have among the hardest job of all of us. So also please give a round of applause for the interpreters.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's time to wrap up this wonderful panel. Thank you very much for your attending here, audience, all the audiences. Thank you very much.